Welcome to Hoop Talk Fanatics, episode number 8. I am here with Chris Milholen from Nets Daily, and I'm excited to see what he has to say about Brooklyn. So welcome, and I'm glad to have you on.
Thanks, man. Great to have you. Great to be on. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. Can't complain.
So, what were your thoughts on coming into the season?
So coming into the season, obviously it was going to be an interesting one, right? Because obviously they came up short last year, they lost to the Bucks, and I knew they always, like they said last time, they said, hey, like we're going to be back next year, we're going to win, and so they mostly had a clean mindset, and obviously they made some nice moves. They upgraded the roster, they got a couple nice pieces. Obviously they got LaMarcus Aldridge back, they got a nice guy DeAndre Bembry, who's kind of a defensive-minded guy that's shown some offensive promise as well. And a couple other role pieces as well to kind of complement the roster and touch around the edges. So, so far, so good for this team. Obviously, they have had a tough stretch going 4 games in 5 days. Obviously, they're coming out of a COVID interruption as well. So, obviously, they've been kind of out of their groove as of late just because of the load and obviously a lot of travel going from the East Coast to the West Coast back to the East Coast. So obviously, they've had a tough schedule due to the I guess you could say just due to the COVID interruptions, because obviously the 1 or 2 of these games were added because of the postponements that were initially because of the COVID-19 Omicron variant breakout. So they're doing well again. They're fighting back, and obviously they're in the midst of experimenting to see what players go together with each
other. So looking back on January 12th against the Bulls, James Harden. Against a very dangerous Bulls team. What were your thoughts on that game?
That game was good, right? So that after the game, we asked Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving as well. Is this like a statement game? Like obviously, because they were struggling at first, they obviously, like I mentioned before, they had that heavy load going from cross country and Chicago and then Portland and everything. So like. It was a nice showing because that kind of showed to the rest of the league what the Nets really looked like at full strength. Because obviously that was the 15th game where they had the full big three, and obviously they grew the biggest lead of the season, which was 38 points at one point. Really, all the guys played well, and it was also extended rest. Most importantly for Kevin Durant and James Harden, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, who didn't play the fourth quarter. So overall, it was a very good showing for this team, and obviously. Against the Bulls, they lost the first 2, so it was important for them to really grab this win and avoid the season sweep.
So last night they played the OKC, and they were without Kevin Durant. So what went through your mind of watching them and seeing them struggle against a not so talented OKC team?
Yeah, so obviously it was a tough spot for these guys, right? Because they came in from that Chicago game to Oklahoma City, so obviously they had to fly from Chicago, even more flights, from Oklahoma City back to Brooklyn and Barclays Center and host these guys. So it was a smart decision by Nash, obviously, to give Kevin Durant and Patty Mills a must-need rest day because obviously their loads throughout this tough stretch have been massive as well. And then obviously Kyrie Irving can't play at Barclays Center. And then they were also without a lot of their front court pieces against the team that leads the league in drives, right? So they were without Nick Claxton, LaMarcus Aldridge. So we saw what kind of their absences, how impactful that was. So, just overall, and Steve Nash even said it himself. He's like, I'm just glad to get, a part of us is just glad to get this week over with because they don't play until Saturday against the Pelicans. So they have this day rest, and obviously they were off from practice today. Some guys are going to go in and get treatment and stuff like that, and may get some run in case but overall, the practice was there. They took off practice today, and to trace back, it was a tough spot to begin with because they landed back from Chicago at 5 a.m. And then James Harden even said himself, I didn't go to bed until 7:30 in the morning. So imagine landing at 5, then going to bed at 7:30, and then playing a game later that night at 8:30 off a heavy back-to-back game against the Bulls. Obviously, they did very well with 30.88 point lead. Harden was also on the floor in the fourth quarter. He didn't get out till I think the 4 minute mark. So it was a just tough thing to get in there and really compete against this Oklahoma City team who also had a day of rest, and they're also built on a lot of young legs themselves. So that's kind of what happened. I kind of really sum it up.
So next Monday is MLK Day, and they go up against a solid Cleveland team. What are your thoughts on the Cleveland Cavs matching up against the Brooklyn Nets?
Yeah, so the Cavs always give some Nets some problems, right? And the Cavs, really based on their profile, they're a defensive-minded team. They have a lot of bigs and a lot of premier front court pieces. Obviously, the Nets know better than anyone what Jared Allen can do. So Jared Allen's one of the best young rim protectors in this league. And you just kind of go down the line. You got a lot of nice pieces in Cleveland. Obviously, Evan Mobley, who's probably he's my pick for the rookie of the year. He's been brilliant this year. Then you got a young backcourt. Obviously, they lost Colin Sexton earlier in the year, but they got Darius Garland, who's performed well and made an all-star campaign for himself. So, it's going to be an interesting game. I think they'll because it'll be interesting to see what they do because Harden's rest day is coming up. But even Steve Nash said himself, he goes, I think the players are all caught up with rest. So they should be able to play at a fully loaded squad. It'll be interesting to see if LaMarcus Aldridge will be back there because he's been dealing with right foot soreness. So he's missed the past 3. They do Nick Claxton. He's got a hamstring injury. So I know the Nets have been very cautious with kind of managing hamstrings as of late. So it'll depend on player availabilities, but I think that they'll pull that one out.
All right, so what do you think of the Eastern Conference as of now?
Very competitive, right? So obviously, if you look compared to the last few seasons, like if you look at just down from top to bottom, it's very similar to how the West was, right? They're all about 2 games apart. If you look from the 2nd seed to just about the 6 and 7, they're all like maybe 4 or 5 games apart at this pace, right? So a lot of teams, and especially in the nature of this season, obviously with a lot of teams getting hit by COVID, the Nets almost had their whole entire roster on the COVID protocols. And then you look at other teams as well who have had that similar damage when it came to that COVID outbreak, when signing a lot of 10-day players, like the Nets signed 4 10-day players, Langston Galloway, Shaquille Harrison, James Ennis, and Wenyen Gabriel, just to kind of fill in and keep the ship afloat. So, it's one of those things where they just kind of keep going, stay afloat, and they'll be kind of good to go. But now with this game coming up, with all the guys rested, I think that after this stretch, I think after the Pelicans game too, if they can pick up a win, I think they'll get their footing back.
Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts on Day'Ron Sharpe?
Yeah, so Day'Ron, obviously he's raw. He's a rookie. He's shown a lot of good things in this opportunity, right? So obviously his rebounding has been number 1, right? So they're really good. He's really aggressive on the glass. He can really grab some rebounds. He has quick hands as well, which is a great attribute to have for a guy his size. So he could really deflect driving lanes, and the one little knock on him is that he's not too great in the pick and roll defense, but obviously that's expected for a guy that size and that weight. So he's learning as it goes, but overall, you couldn't show. There's been a lot of promising things out of him so far.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know, but I'm a Sixers fan. So I wanted your thoughts on how they're doing without Ben Simmons, and what do you think they will get in return for Ben Simmons?
Well, with the Sixers and how they're managing Ben, it's guesswork at this point, right? Because you don't know how the Sixers are going to gauge that, right? Because obviously the Sixers don't want to screw it up, and because obviously this trade for Ben Simmons, whoever they're going to get in return, is really you mostly to sum it up. You want to make sure you get a very good return so you don't jeopardize Joel Embiid, right? Because Joel Embiid, obviously his time in Philly, he's been amazing MVP candidate. And at the end of the day, when you trade away a guy like Ben Simmons, you want to make sure you get a return that keeps you guys in that championship contender conversation. So obviously the trade deadline's coming up. Ben hasn't played any on the court as well, which obviously plays against his factor as well, because they want to see, hey, has he improved since that last year's playoffs? What does he look like? Obviously, he's not practicing, but he's kind of doing his he's kind of staying in shape with his own group and his own camp. But I can't really pinpoint and say like, oh, this is what's going to happen or anything like that, because at the end of the day, it's all guesswork with Ben. It's one of those players that it's going to be a blockbuster deal when it does happen, if it does happen. So at the end of the day, it's kind of the Sixers are obviously going to take it day by day and kind of just make sure they get the best return that they can.
So thank you so much for the time, and it's definitely going to be a very interesting time when the Sixers and Nets square up again, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah, it's gonna be a great showing. It's gonna be a great showing. Yeah, definitely two big Eastern Conference powerhouses. Obviously, the Sixers don't have Simmons, but like they've shown that they're really good with Joel Embiid. So yeah, it's gonna be a fun time. Obviously, Joel has fun against the Nets every time he goes up against them. You saw what happened the last 2 times. So I believe it's March 16th. I think that's the next time they play. But yeah, man, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it, and and just hope all is well, my dude.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem, dude.
Thanks. Bye.